need to mention to Elinor and to some others among you that you might have seen this slide presentation in various other conferences. We try to update, which means we try to restitute more works of art so you won't be bored every time I come up with what the Israel Museum have done. Now I need to say a few things to begin with, and then I will start with my presentation. Look, in the last few years, and we're talking about not exactly since '98 when the Washington Declaration was become public and famous. Israel is always a little behind. And by saying that, I don't mean we're not trying our best, but you know that not all the museums have been doing the due diligence, and even my museum, who sits like a big white whale on the top of Givat Ram's mountain, seems to lag behind in certain cases when they're still pending restitutions of several items, some of which you would see, and some of which are going through a process where I cannot give too many details without breaching some confidentiality laws. So, to begin with, I have to say, like Evis does, we're not the best, but we're trying. We're definitely trying. We don't have a budget. Last August, some of us have been to Berlin to a conference between us and the German Ministry of Culture and Media. These guys have €4 million per year to research their collections. And some places like the Regensburg Museum, and I have a witness to that lecture we heard in Berlin, are now researching the story of items, lost items, that were found in Jewish collections. We're not talking anymore about buildings or insurance or bank accounts or even paintings. We're talking about movable items that were in Jewish homes. We're not there yet, far from it. When the Israel Museum, or I should say its predecessor in the years 1950 to 1955, the Betzalel National Museum, and here I need to open huge parentheses and say the Israel Museum is not a national museum by law, by anything. We are a non-profitable institution. Some would say an American one, because most of our donors come from the American diaspora. But be it true or be it not true, we're not under the censorship or the laws of the government. It's good, sometimes it's not so good, but we're not national. So bearing that in mind, even when there is a budget, we don't receive that. Now, I'm not coming here to talk about what the Ministry of Culture and Education and Sports in Israel have done, or mostly haven't done, but what I'm trying to say is what we're doing within our possibilities and budget at the Israel Museum is our own work. We as curators, art curators, in my case, are obliged by our mandate as curators to research our collections and to point out works of art which seems to be needed of a red flag, that needs to be researched once again. We turn to colleagues abroad, we turn to our friends in Sotheby's and Christie's many a time just to get some information. We turn to archives and libraries. We don't always get what we want. We don't always get what we should be getting as answers. Some of you, my colleagues, have got the same answers of, thank you for letting us know, we will get back to you in 4 months. It takes time, it takes time. Restitution takes time. Restitution is a sad and long process. And we are all aware of the due diligence. We're all aware of the fact that we need to speed things up because people are dying as we speak. And we're not just talking about the survivors, we're talking about my parents' generation, second generation, and even my generation, those whose age should not be named are not so young anymore. So, without further ado, the Israeli Museum has started its own website about its holdings, things that we were given between 50 and 55 by the Jewish Restitution successor organization. 700 to 800 pieces of Judaica artifacts, 250 works on paper, and approximately 200 paintings, most of them from the Jewish holdings of the Jewish Museum of Berlin, came to our holdings. The things I'm about to show you have been done in the museum during the term of James Snyder, our former director, and are being continued as we speak under the guidance of Professor Ido Brunner. In 2008, I've curated 2 exhibitions with catalogs. One exhibition dealt with orphaned art from our own IRSO holdings. The museum at that point was under reconstruction and renovation, so we used our youth wing as a place to show this exhibition. The lower part of the pavilion was dedicated to our own IRSO holdings, and that was the catalog. While the upper floor, which was a much more larger space, was dedicated to a project we did with the Louvre and the National Museum of France. We brought 54 works of art from different periods of time and styles. And at the end of the show, one of them, the red, the rose, the pink wall by Matisse, was restituted to the Harry Fuld family, or basically the inheritance of Harry Fuld. Harry Fuld was a Jew from Frankfurt who fled to England, who gave his, he bequeathed his lawful investigation to his household manager, a Swiss woman called Gisela Martin, who in her time gave it to the Magen David Adom, London. So when the Matisse from my exhibition was restituted, it was given back to the Magen David Adom people, who said they want nothing more but to give it to the Israel Museum. So when I raised my hand in the occasion, they said, after you pay. We didn't. It went to another museum. We had 2 international conferences, which brought a lot of international researchers, art investigators, provenance researchers, art detectives, and such to the museum. It was a great opportunity to create a network to help us along the way. And it also was part of our idea to bring now, in last September, to Israel, the Gurlit exhibition. We are aware of the fact that the Gurlit exhibition have already been on display in Bonn twice in 2 installments, in Berlin and in Bonn. Our exhibition is completely different because it does not put Hildebrand Gurlit, the story behind the collection, on display. We do not pedestalize him, and we do not call him a nice person. We're not trying to whitewash his work. And if you will go through the exhibition, and some of you may already have, they will see that museology-wise, what we did is create a color coding to the exhibition. Whatever is in green, very light, sage green, number 73, 4th in Tambour catalog, is just art, nothing beyond it. You wouldn't even see a portrait of the man. But if you will go into the gray areas, and of course here the gray plays a double game, you will see the documentary film of 13 minutes we've done about the subject of the whole trove. And you will be able to access 2 PowerPoint presentations that will give you ample idea about the story behind the family, behind the collection, and connected to the historical events of the Jewish people in Germany in general. We also published, different from the exhibition catalog, which was published in German and English back in 2017, we published our own Hebrew-English catalog because we felt that the Hebrew speakers should get something that they can use as a source of information. Now, when we get to the restitution business in the museum, there are basically three kinds, and I've divided them into sections, so you will see a lot of images, but rather quickly due to our time limit. First of all, we have claims. And the claims for restitution comes from families who, some of the older people still survive, others have put the claims through their children or through offices. Then we have our own tool searcher at the museum. Some of you may know Miriam Apfeldorf, and some of you may know Ruth Gabriel Apter. Miriam was our former registrar, and Ruth came from the Prints and Drawings department. They both speak several European languages, which helps us when they need to access libraries and documents. And there are, of course, claims that came from outside the museum, but not in any relation to the ESO holdings. The ESO holdings are what we know as looted art. We know it because it was looted from Jews, it was given to various agents, and the Americans grouped them into the depots in Munich, in Offenbach, and in Wiesbaden, mostly Wiesbaden I should say, and brought them to Israel. But we also have our own genuinely wonderful, good, big collection. And we're not shy to say that some of the things in our own collection, given by very good donors, in faithful spirit and in the wish to give the museum wonderful gifts, but they didn't know when they were buying it that they were looted art. So we're doing what we need to do and we return them. We're not doing it with a glee, and sometimes we buy them back if we can, or sometimes we borrow them back. But we need to keep in mind that by looking into our holdings, we do not only look into where the penny fell, and that's the ESO holdings. We really need to investigate our own very precious collections. And lately we've been doing that with the Dutch collection because we had a request from various museums in the world connecting with the wish to display masters of art like Rembrandt, Rubens, Jordaens, Ferdinand Bol, and others. And sometimes we can let them go, and sometimes we have to have immunity from seizure from the governments to which we let the museum borrow our works just because the provenance research have not been completed or leave things to be desired as much as information is lacking. So we're doing it. We're really trying. So the first restitution case that happened within the Israel Museum, I'm not talking about things happening in the 50s when things were still very fresh and most of the owners, if not all of them, unfortunately, were still alive. So in the case of this beautiful Lesser Uri portrait of Max Oxborn, who was art critic in Berlin, it was a chance that his daughter, Hilda, came to the museum to visit an exhibition and saw the painting. Among us is the woman who was then curator of my department, Amalia. So you must remember this incident much better than I do because I was at the youth wing guiding children among the galleries. And I only learned about it when I started gathering the data for my presentation. So here we go into the first group. The first group starts in 2007 with a wonderful, wonderful woman called Hazel Stein. Hazel is a psychiatrist in London, a very funny woman, full of pizzazz. She and her brother were looking for 3 paintings that they suspected might have been at the Israel Museum. Unfortunately, we found only 2. You need to bear in mind, when at 65, lots of works were moved from the old museum downtown Jerusalem with the artist house and the restaurant Mona are now. They were moved to Givat Ram, to the new location of the Israel Museum. Things happen as they always do. You know, you all move departments. You all still think where the milk bottle is. So, you know, the things disappear. I don't say it's good. I only say it happened in '65. And while we still try to find them, we are not always able to do that. So we restituted to the Stein family this portrait, the print, and this particular battle scene, but not in that situation. As you can see, we restored it and reframed it, and it's now in the galleries under long-term loan. Next came the Harburger, still life, which his daughter, the daughter of the painter, came to claim. Then there was the Paul claim, not a small thing to lose for a museum, one of our very few clays. We, of course, still have the Angelus Novus, but this was a sad case because, again, it went to the full holdings and to the Magen David Adom. But we can't do anything against those things. We can only offer to buy them. This painting has been moved between my department and the modern art department several times because it was 3 meters long. No storage room could hold it, so we kept pushing it to one another, and we were very delighted when it was taken back. The Lieberman, my friend Inka Berg from the Jewish Museum in Berlin was the one to find out that this is the Lieberman that belongs to the family, to the holdings of Martha Lieberman, who, upon her death, she committed suicide, left it to her daughter and to her granddaughters. It's back with Margaret White, the granddaughter in Montreal. Another favorite, especially of Shimon Peres, who didn't want to give it to my Four Seasons exhibition because he wanted it for Obama when he came to visit, was this particular painting. It was supposed to be returned to Max Cassirer. We bought it back, so it's now in the Impressionist gallery. The Spitzweg finally left us, going to its family. It took a long time. There was a lot of pendings. It's a very small piece, and you can't imagine how difficult it was to get it to be shipped away. Apparently, when people find their works at the museum, they don't understand that sometimes, okay, we have paintings, what do we do now? Somebody has to take care of the shipment, of the insurance, of the restoration, of the reframing. Then comes the second. These 2 works of art were identified, and here Elinor will testify to that. I feel really very much, Seder Pesach event. The whole family is around me. The Grutzners are one of Hitler's favorite painters, by the way, who usually depicted drunk monks and horny men of clergy. But this group of paintings, partially with our holdings and some in the Belvedere in Vienna, are still waiting for Bernard Meyer to take them. He said his apartment is far too small. They're 2 meters each. Elfriede Landsberger portrait of her grandmother went back to the family of the Landsbergers. And then there are 5 works of art which came from the Rosenthal family and were given to us as gift in memory of the sister who perished. And you can see they're not very important works of art, not in the best condition, but we took them back. And this portrait, we found the family, they didn't want to take it again. This portrait from the Jewish Museum holdings was taken by his granddaughter, niece of a granddaughter from Givatayim. Those 2 portraits are still with me. They're very big, they're very heavy, and the family is still debating how to send them to Swaziland. This painting, we had a claim for it. We were happy to return it, but people demanded that we restore it. It went to our laboratory, has been restored, still in my storage room for the last 3 years. And I'm finishing with the third group, the Degas, that went back to the Van Sacher family. Van Sacher are connected to the Jacques Rot sticker holding. The two gold glass, so important, were taken from the Czartoryski family in Poland, not even Jewish, but still we had to return them, and our friends bought them back. So they're in the museum. Pizarro. We were heartbroken, and we offered $5 million for the Pizarro. They said no and sold it for $32 million. And these are the still pending works of art. We know who owns them, and we're waiting for them to say, okay, we're shipping them next Wednesday. And they're small paintings, they're this size. They used to be in the old people's house in Frankfurt. Two families still in dispute over those two paintings. We're waiting to hear from their lawyers if they will ever claim them back. We know who they belong to, we just wait, they're 15 cousins. A little difficult. So, this is what we've been doing so far. As I said, there's a lot to be done. We're not shying from our responsibility, but one curator and 2-4 hours a week volunteers are not much. And maybe one day our Ministry of Culture and Education or other ministries will take this challenge to help us a little, and then things will speed up. Thank you.